Hey, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to dive into a huge puzzle in how the world really works. And we're going to do it by looking at a pretty dramatic showdown that happened out on the high seas. It's a story that honestly peels back the curtain on the deep tension between a nation's power and the promises it makes.
All right, so let's just jump right in with a question. Imagine a warship from one country fires on a little fishing boat from another country, all in international waters. What do you call that? Is it piracy? Is it just law enforcement? Or is it something else, a high-stakes political power play?
So picture this. It's 1995, and we're in the cold, rough seas of the North Atlantic, specifically a place called the Grand Banks, right off the coast of Newfoundland. For centuries, this spot has been one of the richest fishing grounds on the entire planet, a place that's an economic lifeline for a whole bunch of countries.
While in March of '95, all that simmering tension just boiled over. Canadian patrol boats fired warning shots right across the bow of a Spanish fishing trawler. They boarded it and they arrested the crew. Canada's side of the story? They were accusing the Spanish of illegal overfishing, saying they were destroying the entire ecosystem. Spain? Well, they were absolutely furious. They called it an act of aggression. So who's actually in charge out here? Who gets to make the rules?
To get to the bottom of that, we have to pull the camera way, way back and look at the invisible rulebook that's supposed to govern situations just like this one. We need to talk about the world of international organizations. You see, this whole fishing dispute is a perfect case study for the central tension that really defines all of global politics. And this is the real heart of the issue we're talking about today. On one side, you've got the fact that every single country is sovereign. They're the final authority over their own turf. But on the other side, to solve big problems they can't handle alone, countries make promises and commitments to each other. It's in that space, right in between, that's where all the drama really happens.
Okay, to really wrap our heads around this, we need to define three key concepts. These are basically the building blocks for the world's rulebook. Once you get these three, you'll have the key to cracking this whole sovereignty puzzle. First up, we have international organizations, or IOs for short. The easiest way to think about them is like clubs that countries choose to join, like the United Nations or the World Trade Organization. They're all set up to help countries manage shared problems, things like trade or climate change, or, you guessed it, fishing rights, problems they just can't solve by themselves. That's what we mean when we say interdependence. Next up, state sovereignty. And this one's a big deal. The bottom line here is that, in theory, nobody can tell a country what to do inside its own borders. Sovereignty basically means a state is its own boss. This principle is the absolute bedrock of our entire international system. And finally, the treaty. You can think of this as the actual written-down contract. When a country signs a treaty, like the UN Charter, for example, it is giving its formal consent to be bound by the rules of that club. The treaty is where all the organization's power and all the members' promises come from. Now, this is where it starts to get really, really interesting. How do these promises actually play out in the real world? It's not nearly as simple as just signing a piece of paper. The life of any international rule, really, it breaks down into three separate stages. Okay, so it goes like this. First, you have the obligation. That's the promise a country makes when it joins the club. Then comes compliance. That's the day-to-day choice of whether to actually follow the rules. And last, you've got enforcement. What happens when a country breaks its promise? And yeah, that question mark there, that's kind of the whole point. And here's why that question mark is so important. Because direct punishment, it's incredibly rare. See, unlike your local police who can actually arrest you, there isn't a global police force to arrest a country that breaks a rule. So instead, these IOs have to get creative. They rely on softer tools, persuasion, public pressure, and basically playing on a country's desire to be seen as a good international citizen. Okay, so let's bring all this theory back to our fish fight out in the Atlantic. Because this is where sovereignty plays its ultimate trump card, what you could call the get-out clause. Now, check out this timeline, because it shows you the exact move Canada made. It's pretty clever, actually. For decades, Canada had agreed that the world's top court, the International Court of Justice, could settle its disputes. But as this fishing fight got more and more heated, they saw a legal battle coming. So in 1994, just before they seized that trawler, they strategically rewrote their promise. They unilaterally carved out a special exception just for fishing conservation. So what happened? Well, Spain took Canada to court, and the judges basically just threw up their hands. They ruled they had no power to even hear the case. all because Canada had already withdrawn its consent for this very specific issue. Canada, using its sovereignty, legally changed the rules of the game just for itself.
And this right here is the perfect snapshot of that fundamental clash we've been talking about. It's state sovereignty, a country's right to be its own boss, smashing right up against international obligation, a country's promise to follow the rules of a club it willingly joined. And this really is the hard truth of international politics. Because the whole system is built on this idea of consent, a state can, in many cases, simply choose to withdraw that consent. When it comes down to it, sovereignty is the ultimate trump card.
And that, right there, is the heart of what we call the sovereignty puzzle. We build these powerful organizations that are supposed to regulate what states do, but at the end of the day, they are legally weaker than the very states they're meant to be regulating. It's a fascinating and, let's be honest, often frustrating contradiction. So you might be thinking, if states can just opt out whenever things get tough, what's the point of any of this? Why do countries usually follow international rules, even when there's no real enforcement?
Let's just be absolutely 100% clear about the biggest takeaway here. There is no world police. There is no global 911 you can call when a country breaks a rule. There is no world government. And there is certainly no world police force to back up international law.
But, and this is a big but, that doesn't mean these organizations are powerless. Not at all. Their influence is just more subtle. They're in it for the long game. They shape what's considered normal, legitimate behavior. They can tarnish a country's reputation on the world stage. And maybe most importantly, they create a space for countries to talk, to negotiate, to persuade. Over time, that constant pressure really does shape how countries act.
So that leaves us right back where we started, with that huge unanswered question at the center of global politics. If a country can just pull its consent from the table, what power does its promise truly hold? It shows us that the relationship between sovereignty and obligation, it isn't some fixed equation. It's a constant, delicate balancing act, where the rules of our world are always being negotiated, challenged, and redefined.